And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hi there, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Wednesday, October 1st, 2025. And setting things up for this latter week period, Thursday into Friday. It's Wednesday now, and we have an area of low pressure that's going to be the center sliding just south of St. Lawrence Island, dipping down toward the outer Yukon coast around Imanik, and then kind of shifting back to the north and east across the Seward Peninsula. It's forcing a front inland, and this front has moisture with it, encountering the colder air around the Brooks Range and Alaska and White Mountains here, Alaska Range and White Mountains. We're going to see areas of accumulating snow spreading eastward. Behind and along the front where the air is a little warmer, it'll be mainly in the form of rain. There's going to be secondary development later this Wednesday evening into Thursday morning over Cook Inlet, and then in the northwest corner here of the Gulf, just outside of Hinchinbrook entrance, and that's going to facilitate some heavier precipitation, especially on the north side of Prince William Sound through the northeastern Gulf Coast, and then turning down into the northern, especially outer areas of the northern panhandle here for Thursday night into Friday. So that's not all. We'll have another low coming up and crossing the western half of the Aleutians here as we get into Friday evening and Saturday, and then pushing up into the central Bering. This system will be a wet, windy, and mild one, so expect more wind and rain along areas of the west-southwest coast down through the Aleutians as we go through the weekend. And this overall active weather pattern is going to continue into next week with a series of lows coming out of the North Pacific into the Bering, and then facilitating secondary development south and southeast of the Alaska Peninsula that'll also eventually impact areas of the Gulf. So active pattern, we have IFR conditions Thursday morning, especially south slopes of the Brooks Range, central Yukon Valley, extending along the Alaska Range where there will be accumulating snow and certainly lower visibilities and icing potential. And then out here across the northern Gulf, there will be some heavier coastal rains, and then as you get up into the mountains, some heavier snow. For Thursday afternoon, we continue to see this weak low pressure here, but it's the feed of moisture coming in along the northern, northeastern Gulf Coast into the northern panhandle. We have IFR conditions. Again, a wet, heavier snow up through the mountains, and moderate to locally heavy coastal rains. Further north, MVFR conditions along the Alaska Range, out here in the White Mountains, north and east of Fairbanks, and IFR along the eastern Brooks Range and back toward Kotzebue Sound, up through Kivalina and Point Hope. And then we start to see IFR conditions coming into the central western Aleutians, near and west of Adak, Thursday afternoon. By Friday morning, still IFR conditions expected across a good portion of the panhandle with that feed of moisture, mainly rain, lower levels up through the mountains. There could be some snow there, but back here to the north and west, still middle Yukon Valley back up toward the central western Brooks Range. We're looking at IFR conditions Friday morning, some pockets here or there down along the lower Alaska Range, and then back out here, that low producing, again, it's a windy, milder, wetter system coming up into the central western Aleutians with IFR conditions there. And for Friday afternoon, we should see conditions improve to at least MVFR across a good part of the panhandle, lingering MVFR conditions around mountains of the mainland, in through the middle, lower Yukon Valley, and then we start to see IFR conditions ahead of a front that's streaming warm, moist air northeastward. So that's going to be coming up into the lower Yukon coastline, back through Nunavik Island, as well as St. Matthew, St. Paul, all the way back out toward the central Aleutians. And this will be the next main weather system that we'll be keeping an eye on, as it will have eventual impacts across a good portion of the west and even up into the Gulf here as we go through the upcoming weekend. Quick check then of past conditions Thursday. Anaktuvik Pass IFR becoming MVFR. Adigan Pass should generally hold on to IFR conditions during the day Thursday, and again, there'll be some periods of snow, lower ceilings, and visibility to contend with at times. Lake Clark, Merrill, IFR Thursday morning, giving way to MVFR conditions. Same thing, Rainy Pass, Isabel Pass, IFR in the morning, giving way to MVFR, and again, there will be some periods of light to moderate snow, lower ceilings and visibilities at times as we go through, especially this Wednesday, starting this afternoon, evening, and continuing into Thursday. Isabel Pass, IFR becoming MVFR by Thursday midday afternoon. Mentasta Pass holding on to VFR conditions until at least early Thursday, then becoming MVFR. Further south and west, Tanita Pass, IFR conditions becoming MVFR Thursday midday and afternoon. Portage Pass, IFR in the morning, giving way to MVFR. And finally, Chilcoot and White starting with VFR, but with that moisture increase and precipitation arriving, we're looking at IFR conditions developing as we go through the day Thursday, especially through the afternoon and into the evening. So freezing levels at the surface, it's below freezing across much of the northern central areas of the state, certainly as you get up in elevation around the mountains. And there is overall a trough sitting here out over the western portion of the mainland. Some warmer air trying to come northeastward up from the North Pacific into the lower Gulf toward the Panhandle. And then back here to the west, we do have freezing levels aloft above 8,000 feet along the Aleutian chain. And we'll see a surge of warmer, moist air coming northeastward with that stronger low as we get into later Friday and into Saturday by the time it gets up here into the central Bering. So Thursday icing with the initial secondary low that takes shape this evening over Cook Inlet, shifting eastward tonight and Thursday morning here outside of Hinchinbrook entrance. So we have a pretty good southerly flow of moisture coming up into the Copper River Basin and also up along the northern northeastern Gulf Coast, shifting into the Panhandle. So we find mainly rain along the coast, but some snow as we go increase in elevation on the coastal mountains. And as you get further inland, again along the central Alaska range, Isabel Pass back toward Windy Pass, periods of accumulating snow tonight into Thursday, also extending up into the White Mountains. We also find some potentially moderate icing along the Brooks Range back to the west. And then out here in the western southwest portion of the Bering and through the western Aleutians, there could be moderate icing above 10,000 feet with those advancing thicker cloud cover coming in from the North Pacific. So here we see Thursday troughiness here over the eastern mainland, 130 knot jet max from the lower Gulf into the North Pacific, mainly out of the west. And then out here further southwestward, there's the low center well south of the southwest of the Aleutians. We have a jet max of 115 to 125 knots pushing up through the western Aleutians. And we find northwest winds out over the Bering up through about St. Matthew on the order of 100, 110 knots. At 9,000 feet, there's a core of stronger winds. Again, the secondary low circulation here over the northwestern Gulf. We do find some stronger winds aloft in the mid-levels at about 700 millibars, 9,000 feet coming up. 40 plus 50 knot winds up here into the Panhandle from the southwest, and then a broad belt of 50 to 60 knot winds over the southwest areas inland from Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, lower Yukon Delta, all the way back out to St. Matthew into the central Bering Sea. And at 3,000 feet, there are some stronger winds on Thursday just off of the Gulf coast here of the Panhandle, 40 to 50 knots. Backside, some 40 knot winds coming out of Lower Cook Inlet, northeast of Kodiak Island. And then here, a belt of winds in the order of 35 to 45 knots from Norton Sound, Lower Yukon, Kuskokwim areas, and extending back on out north of the Aleutian chain. And then behind me, you can see the stronger circulation beginning to show up of that low coming out of the North Pacific, which will be sweeping across the western half of the Aleutians as we get into Friday and Friday night. So we expect moderate turbulence on Thursday across areas of the Gulf Coast, especially outside of Cross Sound on up to Yakutat Bay, and then also Cape Suckling on over toward Prince William Sound. Potentially some stronger winds too on the backside of the circulation here out of Lower Cook Inlet, northeast of Kodiak Island, surface to 5,000 feet here along the Gulf. Could be some moderate turbulence around the Alaska Range, especially Isabel Pass, also areas of the Wrangell-St. Elias Mountains. Little pocket of moderate turbulence potentially off the Lisburne Peninsula at Point Hope and Cape Lisburne, surface to 3,000 feet. And then as we look along areas of the west, from Norton Sound out to St. Lawrence, St. Matthew, St. Paul, and down along the Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas. We expect the potential for some moderate turbulence surface to 3,000 feet on Thursday.